All right, well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Litchfield Budget Committee meeting here that we're holding after the budget hearing tonight. We are re-voting one warrant article and then voting on 5 school warrant articles that we haven't voted on yet tonight. So I'll read each of the warrant articles. We'll start with the town. We have our members here tonight, and then we'll do a roll call vote on those. The police station, we're not going to vote on tonight. Because the Board of Selectmen pushed the bond hearing until next week. We want to give them an opportunity to have the bond hearing, and so we will vote on the Article 9, the police station, at town deliberative on February 1st, or after town deliberative on February 1st.
Can I ask one question on that?
Yes.
So the bond hearing still isn't going to make an impact as far as the tax impact for 2020.
2025.
Right, 2025, it's still going to be $0.00 regardless of what happens at the bottom.
That is correct.
And then item number 2, I was told that you can't put future year tax impact on that particular warrant.
Let's still go out with what the town sends out and whatnot, and they'll have the information.
So I guess if the warrant is not going to change, why can't we vote on the police station today? Because it's going to still read exactly the
Well,
same.
in theory, some,
$0.
but it is, but in theory, some people may, you are still gonna factor in future years into your.
The long term.
So if it's a 15-year bond versus a 30-year bond, some people are like, well, that annual payment's not so bad, I'll vote it for it. So I agree with you. There's also, in your mind, you should still be factoring the long term.
I agree with you. No tax impact. But Ms. Douglas is right. Like, I think this gives us an opportunity to see what the bond schedule payment's going to be, the term as well as the dollar amount for each year, and factor that into our overall vote. I wouldn't want that to come back and say we didn't factor that in to our votes after the fact. But good. All right.
Change your vote, but.
So the one town article that we are going to re-vote tonight is Article 16, Supplement Fire Coverage. And the reason we're re-voting this is that the Board of Selectmen changed this amount in what was $47,400 down to $41,550, which, if you recall, when we voted on this last time, we could not support it because it would put us over the tax cap. So we have the opportunity, because the number changed, we are going to re-vote it. But if we choose to vote to support this or recommend it, it does not put us over the tax cap currently. Okay? So Article 16, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate $41,550 to supplement the fire department's budget to allow for increased coverage as necessary to protect the safety and welfare of the residents of Litchfield. Majority vote required. Estimated 2025 tax rate impact is 3 cents. I'll entertain a motion to recommend. Motion by Mr. Leary.
Second.
Second by Mr. Hayes. We'll do a roll call vote.
All right, do we get discussion at all?
Yes, we will do
Thank
discussion.
you.
Yes.
Sorry. Everybody wants to get out of it.
I was going to point out real quick, I just want to point out, we only have 8 members with us tonight. Mr. Burke is unable to be here, so there is an instance where if we do have a 4-4 vote, it would not be recommended. So I just wanted to state that. Go ahead.
So in future years, is this then going to change? And did the Board of Selectmen reduce the amount on this year's warrant article in order to meet the tax cap? And then next year, I'm going to see this line item on the budget
47-4.
that is higher than what we have today. And that's my concern, is that if all it is just an inflated drop to get it through, but then next year it's going to have a bigger impact on the tax rate than the budget, I would want to know that. Or is it planning on staying the same with maybe just cost of inflation or contractual increases?
Our hope is that, well, it'll go back to the number that was originally proposed, but we dropped it to get below the cap, okay? Hoping that, because it's gonna pick up later in the fiscal year, but if it got to the point where that money was expended, we could find it somewhere in the budget to continue.
Was the original number that was put forth by the select team 60,000?
It was, yeah, it was much higher, and we asked them to drop it.
So what is the real number that that position will carry?
What is on the original one, the 40s?
Not 60, it'll be 47?
Correct.
Will we be tracking that separately so that next budget season we can say, how much of that did you spend? We authorized so much, but we actually came in under.
it's a good question, Mr. Hayes, because that original number was about 66. The Board of Selectmen put $19,136 in September, which got us to the 47 that was on the original warrant.
But if they cut it with the intention of coming up with that money,
I don't think there's any intention.
the 66,
I don't think there's any intention.
Kim, Ms. Kleiner has it.
Yes, ma'am, Ms. Klein.
Let's put it this way, it's not my intention.
In discussion with the fire chief, we've asked a number of things. We are going to track this line item separately, so we will know exactly how much is spent. The fire department has also installed a new software that is now tracking all calls in response for service by individual, what they are, how many people responded, so forth and so on. So we want to be able to analyze a whole year of that data so that when we come back to you next year, we can tell you exactly why, how many people are needed for the calls and the service that's being provided to Litchfield.
So these,
That software was just installed a couple months ago.
so we don't have control over how many show up though, right? You put out a call and 15 people show up, then,
No, we absolutely have control
okay, so,
over who's responding.
okay.
Thank you. Any additional discussion on this? Okay, roll call vote. We are so out of order, this is gonna throw me off. Mr. LaPlante,
Yes.
Mr.
No.
Taylor, Mr. Barker.
Yes.
Mr. Cutter,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Hayes,
no.
Ms. Douglas.
Yes,
Mr. Leary.
Yes.
And I am a yes. Motion carries 6-0, so Article 16 will be recommended by the Budget Committee. That concludes our town voting. We will now vote on the 5 remaining school warrant articles. We have not voted on any of these, so none of these are revotes. A point of information, some of these items did change. I shared with you all today 2 different documents that came from the superintendent. The first was the revised warrant article, which, as you noticed tonight, the network administrator article was not in there. It was talked about that the reserve fund was taken from 500 to 250, and there was actually another article that was in there for 135K that was removed altogether as well. So there was a document that had the new warrant articles. There's a second document, Mr. Cutter has a hard copy of that. If you wish to see it, that showed a breakdown of the $248,000 that was reduced by the school board last night as a part of the operating budget. So everyone should have had an opportunity to see those, review those. If you want to see a hard copy of it right now, Mr. Cutter has that. Welcome to that. I want to read Article 1, and then we will vote on it. Article 1. Shall the Litchfield School District vote to raise and appropriate as an operating budget, not including appropriations by special warrant articles and other appropriations voted separately, the amount set forth on the budget posted with the warrant or as amended by the vote at the first session for the purposes set forth herein, totaling $28,456,055. Should this article be defeated, the default budget should be $28,154,937, which is the same as last year with certain adjustments required by previous action of the Litchfield School District or by law, or the school board may hold one special meeting in accordance with RSA 4013, 10, and 16 to take up the issue of a revised operating budget only. Majority vote required. Operating estimated tax impact $1.90. Default estimated tax impact $1.65. I'll entertain a motion to recommend.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Cutter. Second. Second by Mr. Hayes. Discussion.
So, just to kick this one off a little bit, so the board did take an action last night to reduce this by $248,273, as mentioned last week. I was a bit surprised, by the tax impact that was presented to the budget committee. The board had not met to talk about that tax impact. We had our meeting last night. We did talk about that tax impact. This was, one of the main items that we talked about to offset that tax impact, which dropped it down to $1.90. There was also an adjustment made, thanks to Ms. Kleiner, and a discussion with the superintendent to increase the revenue, the town revenue, the town valuation, which also dropped our tax impact. So Ms. Kleiner confirmed what the town valuation was. That is now confirmed on the school side. That had a decreased tax rate. That's why we're at $1.
It wasn't that it had to change the revenues. I know He had talked about maybe,
That,
we
yeah,
typically carry over 200,000, you're gonna maybe carry over more, do that change as well?
We had talked actually at length about that tonight, and what the right number was. Do we increase it to 300,000 and what that does? At the end of the day, the board was not comfortable with
Good.
doing so. We kept it flat at 200,000, with all the other numbers and projections.
does that, my question would be, is that even, is that too high? Just based on what you have listed for your warrant articles to be paid out of the unexpended fund budget? You said 400,000. To get to the 200,000, you now need 600,000.
Well, you're talking about this year and the next year.
Yeah, but that's what. You carry the money from this year forward. So your revenue for next year comes out of this year's unexpended fund.
Yes.
So at the end of this year, based on all that we've been hearing, do we truly expect to have 600,000 left over because your 200,000 comes last?
That's the question, right? We don't know. We have no idea.
So while the numbers look good at well, I'm not gonna say look, 'cause I still think the budget is a little too high. But we're still taking a shot in the dark that revenues will be there to support $200,000 return.
That's correct. We have no idea what the end of the year projections are going to be.
My other question is, looking at what you guys removed, it looked like you removed a position TBD. Has that position also, the funding for that position also been removed from the default budget?
The funding for the positions removed.
From the
Yes,
default budget as well?
correct. Funding for the positions removed. Yep.
Any additional discussion?
Yeah, so I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, part of the reduction was based on removing CTE transportation for Pinkerton Academy, correct?
Correct.
How is that possible when for many years Dr. Jetty continued to harp on that if someone shows any CTE program across the state, that the school was required to provide transportation? How are we getting around that claim by Dr. Jetty, or was Dr. Jetty incorrect that it is not a mandate that we have to go ahead and fund that transportation?
Believe, and superintendent can chime in, I believe what I heard last night, so please correct me if I'm wrong, was that there was Pinkerton has now directed us to have our kids transport themselves. It was a directive that came from them. I don't know when that directive
All of
came.
our kids are self-transporting to Pinkerton at this point.
Okay, so I guess my question was, your predecessor continuously told me year after year that if a child shows a CTE program,
In
and his
Concord.
name was anywhere in the state, that the district was required to provide transportation. So we're sure that now with Pinkerton asking the district, that mandate is now no longer necessary and that cut can actually be achieved?
There's no
If you're
legal
asking-
ramification.
I don't want to speak on anything that, you know,
Okay, so let me ask you a different way. Do you feel comfortable that with having Pinkerton telling you
yeah.
that
I
they
feel
do not
comfortable
want
based on my
transport,
relationships with
you
other
feel
people.
like you're covered?
Yeah, I feel we're okay.
Ms. Harrison?
I was just gonna say, I think it can be a requirement that we provide transportation, but it's up to the students whether or not they want to use that transportation or self-transport.
But we're not gonna provide funding for transportation, so how can we provide it if we don't fund it?
It'd have to come from somewhere else.
We don't even have to transfer them to school, why we have to transfer them to Derry?
Trust me, this is something that I went back and forth with
Anything
Dr.
that
Jenny
my
3 years.
experiences as a high school principal for.
Well, I can tell you what I can talk
Talk to
to Jenny, so
CTE
I'm not-
centers. We all want the same thing, kids to be successful in CTE programs. You figure out how to make it work.
Yeah.
You know, right now, we have our kids self-transporting to Pinkerton, because that's how we can maximize kids in those programs right now. So, you know, I would imagine Pinkerton would be comfortable continuing that type of setup with us a year from now. Because usually CTE centers they want kids. That's the tuition, you know, so.
Any additional discussion on this, on the budget? Mr.
I
Hayes?
would just thank Mr. Cutter and Superintendent for their openness and their honesty through the process this year, after so many years, quite frankly, of getting smoke blown up our tailpipes. It's nice and refreshing to get honest and straight out dialect at school. So thank you for
I
that.
was just gonna add, I really appreciate, I think a lot of us had sticker shock when we saw numbers last week. I know it's not easy to go back and make bigger cuts than you already made, so I appreciate the school board administration having tough conversations last night. It was a lengthy meeting that admittedly I fell asleep in the middle of, since I was watching it late. But, I appreciate taking that hard and difficult look to balance what is best for students and teachers as well as the taxpayers. Any other additional discussion?
Yeah,
Mr. Hayes?
just to state something on the tax impact. On a $500,000 home, if we go with the budget, we pass it, it's $950 incremental. And if we go with the default budget, it's $825 incremental. Just to give you a basis,
Thank you, sir. Any other discussion?
And that's just the operating budget.
just the operating budget.
Any other discussion?
There's 25 cents difference.
I appreciate the quick turnaround on the answers for the default. I may not agree with them all. I don't agree with them all, but I appreciate,
Expect you to disagree.
but I appreciate that you stated your case
I try to take it
and,
seriously.
With a lot of detail.
and in a polite manner. Like that's, again, to the point of, I think that this season has gone a lot better. So I appreciate that. Hopefully next year we can get a little earlier so we can have those conversations.
Look, we already know some things we're gonna do differently. It's our first go around.
Any
No,
other,
and that's why there's been grace given.
any other discussion on Article 1? Okay, roll call vote, all same flow. Mr. LaPlante?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
Mr. Barca?
Yes.
Mr. Cutter?
Yes.
Mr. Hayes?
Yes.
Ms. Douglas?
No.
Mr. Leary?
Yes.
And I am a yes. Motion carries 7-1-0 to recommend Article 1.
And I thank Mr. Cutter because he changed me from a no to a yes with our conversation last weekend.
All right, Article 5. Shall the Litchfield School District vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $250,000 to be added to the Building Maintenance Capital Reserve Fund established in 2005 for the purpose of funding school capital improvements, building maintenance, and repairs in the Litchfield School District? Majority vote required, estimated tax impact was 20 cents. I'll entertain a motion to recommend.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Cutter, do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. LaPlante, discussion.
So, Mr. Chair, as mentioned during public comment, I guess, the board did take an action last night to reduce this in half over what the budget committee saw last week. Again, looking at the overall tax impact, we did feel that this one was another one where we could do more to reduce the overall tax burden to the taxpayers while still achieving the overall goal to start to build our tax base and building up this account to start to meet some of the capital needs across our buildings. This isn't addressing GMS. That's not what the intention is for this. It is to start to address some of the items in on-site insight, notably around CHS. There are considerable items at CHS that need to be addressed this year, right? This fund, actually, we talk about the roof. The roof is aging out in the next 5-6 years. This does allow us to have just over $500,000 in that account, should it be passed, which meets that year one goal to start to build up 500,000 in that account.
I don't know, wasn't it year one goal like 5 million?
Well,
1 million.
1 million.
the board goal to start to build up the tax base.
So in the expectation, will become an annual request. I don't know.
It will, and again, it starts to build up the tax impact
No, I hear
little
you.
by little.
I agree in principle. Ouch.
Yeah.
Any,
Look, I agree, right? But I mean, how else are we gonna get ahead of some of these things?
Yeah, I think it's responsible to look at the way you're looking at it. It's not easy to save. I know it's painful in the moment we're gonna talk about it, but a bond 6 years from now is not the answer on maintenance. I mean, we
I'd
know-
rather earn our own interest by ourselves.
Correct.
So again, I agree. I'm gonna vote for it, but ouch.
any additional discussion on Article 5?
I thought for sure you'd blame this one on me.
I mean, I would be glad to entertain a motion to add a zero to it.
Just get a few friends at deliberative, you'll be all set.
Seeing no additional discussion, roll call vote. Mr. LaPlante?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
Mr. Barca?
Yes.
Mr. Cutter?
Yes.
Mr. Hayes?
Yes.
Ms. Douglas?
Yes.
Mr. Leary?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Motion carries 8-0-0 to recommend Article 5.
Can't vote no when I ask for it.
Article
Those are really big.
7. Shall the Litchfield School District vote to raise and appropriate up to a sum of $200,000 to be added to the Special Education Capital Reserve Fund established in 2004 for the purpose of educating disabled students, with this sum to come from the June 30 fund balance available for transfer on July 1 of this year, with no additional amount to be raised from taxation, majority vote required, estimated tax impact $0.00. So I'll entertain a motion to recommend.
So made.
Motion by Mr. Taylor,
Second.
second by Mr. Cutter. Discussion?
The board did talk about this article quite a bit last night. While it is our intention certainly to use unassigned fund balance from this, we have talked a lot in past meetings about the separate account that we have for special education. We have not had a hearing for that account quite yet, or we have not withdrawn from that account quite yet. I can tell you, it's coming. We absolutely are going to have a need in the very near future to withdraw from that account.
So if we need to withdraw from that account, then why would we be expecting 200,000 to be available at the end of the year to offset taxes?
Well, because we are going to have a real need, Carrie, to replenish that account.
But what I'm saying is, your budget is built around returning $200,000. I'm saying, based on what you just said, you're not gonna have that $200,000. So that 1.9 tax rate isn't accurate.
It may not be.
It's not accurate. And so, and we have,
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Mr. O'Connell.
So because we expect that, we gotta withdraw this money potentially for specifically special ed purposes, right? So there's other accounts within, obviously we have lots and lots of accounts in the school district budget that we will not spend as much money on, and we probably won't hit the maximum amount of money that we had budgeted in those particular lines. But this, obviously, this fund right here that we're talking about for this warrant article and that we're gonna have to pull from is dedicated specifically for special ed. We're expecting to have to go over budget in the specifically special ed, so that's why it is for that account.
all right,
And that's why we can bank on having some end of the year funds still available in our.
so what that is essentially just a change in philosophy with the new administration. Because in the past, you'd go to the general fund first. I don't think we've ever tapped the special ed fund because it always has been covered by the general fund.
Yeah, I think it may be a change in philosophy. This is how, I've been, I guess,
Yeah.
raised in this type of world, is you try to stick within your, purpose of your lines, right? Like, and if this was $100, sure, we would make that up somewhere else, but we're talking hundreds of thousands, right? Like, it's not like oh, we're gonna buy one less set of books over here to account for something, right?
No, we've been in this, right, I hear you, it is a change, because in the past, when we've had these big bills, and this isn't the first big bill.
Yeah.
We've tapped the general fund first. So
Yeah.
it's recognizing this is a change in budgetary, again, new system, new group, learning how each other functions,
Yep.
understanding that you're gonna run it a little differently than your predecessors.
So I do agree. Here's my concern, and I brought this up last year. If special ed was that important and that critical of a number, first of all, the school board did not put in a warrant article to replenish it last year. And now this year, the problem is, it's behind a $250,000 tax. So what happens if you go ahead and pull from the existing fund?
Yep.
Right? And you only have 250 left over, and now you can't replenish it. Now what happens? Like, if this is the biggest drag on,
Right,
you potentially missing your budget, why was this warrant article not first in line so it could?
The 250 is not coming from unspent, is it?
Yes.
Yes.
250 for the.
No, it's not.
No.
He's unassigned.
This is the first, it's coming from unspent, besides we changed things.
This is the first unassigned line.
And there is a example happening right now on why this stuff is so critical, and that's Merrimack Valley School District, if you read about it at all in the last week. They overspent their budget last year by $2.1 million. 1.2 of it was because they had special ed costs that arrived in their district that came after their budgeting cycle. They exhausted their special ed account and still didn't have enough money, right? So this is they're not the first district, not gonna be the last in that. I'm hoping we never are in that shape, right? But and I don't have an answer, but special ed costs are wild right now. They just are. The funding of it is crazy. We saw an article today related to possibly getting some money from the trust fund in terms of education to offset some of the lack of funding we got from that. Stuff is moving at such a quick pace for all of our districts. We're just trying to keep up with it. So we just want to protect ourselves so we're not in those situations like unfortunately Merrimack Valley.
I'm much more comfortable knowing that this is the first one.
Yeah.
Perfect, thank you.
Any other discussion on Article 7?
And this will sit in the fund and not be used for something else, right?
Correct.
Yeah, it can only be used in special ed.
Well, because it was stated in the past that if they had a shortfall somewhere, and extra money in special ed.
That was the reserve.
No,
I know, but it's just saying the special ed.
The trust fund itself, this trust can only be
If
used.
it's gonna sit there, yep, that's a great idea.
All right. No additional discussion. Roll call vote. Mr. LaPlante?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
Mr. Barca?
Yes.
Mr. Cutter?
Yes.
Mr. Hayes?
Yes.
Ms. Douglas?
Yes.
Mr. Leary?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Motion carries 8-0-0 to recommend Article 7. Article 8, shall the Litchfield School District vote to raise and appropriate up to a sum of $125,000 to be added to the Capital Improvements Expendable Trust Fund established in 2020 for the purpose of funding the study, planning, and cost of new construction or renovation of existing facilities in the Litchfield School District, with this sum to come from the June 30 fund balance available for transfer on July 1 of this year. No additional amount to be raised from taxation. This amount is consistent with the capital plan adopted by the town of Litchfield in September 2020. Majority vote required. Estimated tax impact $0.00. I'll entertain a motion to recommend.
Motion to recommend.
Motion by Mr. Hayes. Do I have a second? By Mr. Leary. Discussion.
This is the same account that we've been putting the same dollar amount in for years. This is consistent with past articles.
Yes, which makes me sick when we think about how much we've spent on a project that failed. What is the current balance in that account?
Ooh, I don't know that. Thank you.
316.
316?
316,000 for the planning of a project. We're not sure what we're gonna do yet. Why can't we live off the 316 we have now? We can't figure out any redesign and reconfiguring the 316,000 and then come with a real plan?
Well, I think this is also for renovation as well of existing facilities. That's what's in the warrant article. And I think part of this is we're planning likely for some renovation work and having this account for that purpose.
So we're gonna hire an
helps us.
architect to help us renovate this year?
Well, I think that's to be determined, right? And we're waiting for the recommendation from the FIC.
Any additional discussion on Article 8?
I just don't think we're ready, honestly. We have over $300,000. Our renovation, depending on the size, isn't gonna require anywhere near that to figure out what you're gonna do. When we're seeing the tax impact that we're seeing right now,
Okay, any other discussion, comments? All right, roll call vote. Mr. LaPlante?
No.
Mr. Taylor?
No.
Mr. Barca?
No.
Mr. Cutter?
Yes.
Mr. Hayes?
No.
Ms. Douglas?
no.
Mr. Leary?
Yes.
I am a yes as well. Motion fails 3-5-0. Article 8 will not be recommended by the Budget Committee by a vote of 3-5-0. Last article, Article 9. Shall the Litchfield School District vote to establish a capital reserve purchase fund under the provisions of RSA 35-1 to be known as the Solar Array Fund for the purpose of accumulating funds to acquire the solar equipment at the Litchfield Middle School at the end of the 6-year agreement, and to raise and appropriate the sum of $100,000 to be placed in this fund, with this sum to come from the June 30 fund balance, available for transfer on July 1 of this year with no additional amount to be raised from taxation, and further to designate the school board as agents to expend this fund. Majority vote required. Estimated tax impact $0.00. I'll entertain a motion to recommend.
So moved.
May I have a motion by Mr. Cutter, second.
Second.
By Mr. Leary. Discussion.
I hate this project.
We all hate it, but I think this is the least expensive of the options.
I also think that, you know what, it's too soon. First of all, it's not even live yet. And second of all, we have no way of being able to potentially estimate. I appreciate what Mr. Cutter put together in terms of, yes, it is going to be quite a bit of a jump on what the monthly expense is, but I also don't know what different components that need to be replaced, batteries, et cetera, are going to be half of that increase, double that increase. I think it's too soon to tell, and because it hasn't gone live yet, I don't feel like the clock is ticking yet, and this could be deferred until we get to a point where the system is live and we can get some estimates on replacement parts.
I struggle with this one because I think Mr. Cutter made a good case in explaining the rising cost increases per year from 6 to 25, and you're talking, $100,000 jump from where the payment currently is on an annual basis by the time you get to the end. So on one hand, you look at that and say, smart to do this because owning is going to save us more money in the long run.
But do we know that? Because we're gonna
Well,
have to replace.
Based on the information we have right now, yes, but what I was going to say is, I think there are still other questions to be asked. Questions that Mr. Obelinas have raised, questions Mr. Taylor just said, like, what are the costs of owning
Right.
compared to the cost of the lease? We know based on what we know right now, that if we just bought it outright and incurred no other expenses associated with maintenance, taking them down or whatever, which isn't true, yes, this is the most cost-effective way to do it. I really struggle with this because I think the smart and fiscal thing to do is to start to put money aside. Just don't know if this is the right year to do it. That's where I am.
When do we anticipate it going live? No, next.
Dude, if I had a ball, right, you know.
I just didn't know if the change right now.
Years ago.
We were,
And that's the thing, and that-
Superintendent and I are meeting on Tuesday with the.
The superintendent chair meeting with Dynamic Grid on Tuesday, again, to discuss further. The hope is that in the upcoming month or two, my target now would be February break, because some of this stuff has to happen when you don't have kids in the building. So that, I'm speaking as my best guess, is probably as good as anyone else's right now. That my hope would be, we figure out the next step, turn this thing on over February break, because that's when we don't have kids in the building. There was some work done over Thanksgiving break that moved to forward progress, and so hopefully this next break, it wasn't ready to flip during Christmas break or December break, so hopefully during February break, that is. Now the contract for when the 6-year out doesn't kick in until we get the storage as well in the back, and that's supposed to come sometime this spring. That's the estimate that we keep getting, so.
So by the time that flips on, maybe summer.
so question,
But
I get one
so the
clarity.
clock, you said the clock isn't ticking yet, but it's coming. It's
the clock
coming.
starts when everything he just
They're
said
winding it.
is complete.
My point is, it's not a year or 2 years, it's this soon.
We're down to months.
so
We're down to
question,
months. right?
question.
Hopefully.
So,
What is the wording of this, the warrant? Like, if per se we decide that cost of ownership is ridiculous and we choose to bite the bullet on the increase, could the money we set aside now be used to offset said increase? In which case we're setting aside money either for the purchase or to ease the increase in the future, in which case, sure, it makes sense.
I think the way it reads at the end, not a lawyer, Thames is, and further to designate the school board as agents to expend this fund, my interpretation of
What is
that.
the name of it though? It's
The
the
solar
purchase,
It's a purchase.
but it's a purchase fund, so
No,
who
I
would-
think
understanding is
No,
you
that's
have
the
to
solar
take some
array.
steps.
So to me,
Right.
that's what
My
I want to
understanding
use
is
it
there's
for.
steps
As long as
involved
it's
here.
For the purpose of accumulating funds to acquire the
Why?
solar equipment.
Right, this is specifically to acquire as written right now.
Can we
Right.
reword it such that it's the solar array fund, in which case then you can use it to, but it's
We need a
purchase fund.
purpose, we need to write in the purpose since we're establishing the trust fund. Now, when I say there's steps, and don't rely solely on what I'm about to say, we would check with our lawyers
Yeah.
before all of this. Is if we came to the end of this, we have that money in it, say $600,000.
Mm-hmm.
Say we elected not to purchase, we would have to put out in a warrant article that we would close the trust fund, right? Or like make the decision to close it. Then there can be a follow-up warrant article that says we return it or do X with it or transfer it or do everything else that kind of associated with it. So it's not as easy as just like, hey, now we want to use it for this purpose.
Right.
We have to keep asking the.
Well, no, I'm just wondering if there's a way to reword it, since we
Well-
did a building fund and used it for renovations. So is there a way to reword this that
I
would
like
give you
where, I
flexibility?
like where you're going. If we were to shoot this one down or not recommend it, and then have it brought back next year, which again, the clock is only winding, it's not ticking, that clearly stated that legal gave the okay, that it is for the purchase and/or maintenance, then we also technically may not need the full 600 the first year, because all we needed for is to offset the lease cost difference, if we decided to say, you know what, we're not ready to purchase it at this time.
Look, I think this article, was an ask of mine, right, to the superintendent. to the
I think I was harassing you for it too,
to
so
the
I
board.
agree.
Well, I mean, we've been talking about this candidly for years on the CIP and how we need to action it, and it's been an ask of many. How come we're not budgeting for this if it's a known cost? Well, guess what? Here it is, people. It's a known cost. We're asking for it. This is the opportunity where we're saying we're not raising and appropriating for it. We
Right.
want to set aside money for it now.
I like the idea of setting the money aside for it. I just want to make sure that we do it right. And if there was a way to be able to give us the either or of purchase or offset the additional cost of the lease increase so that we don't want to pay for maintenance and repairs, I think that's a better article to
I
bring
just
back
don't know
next
that
year.
that's an option. I mean, we're in an active contract, right? Like, what maintenance and repair, like, contract else, what other options are there if
It
we're
would be
in?
after we purchased it. That's what.
But now we're in a separate contract for maintenance?
Be a different company, yes, it would be. But you're planning ahead for that. One thing to note for this, correct me if I'm wrong, this is the last of the unassigned fund. So it doesn't say up to $100,000, but in theory, it could be less than $100,000 because it is the last
Right. if
coming
there's
from
no-
the unassigned fund balance.
Correct.
Well, if there's none left, then our tax increase rate just went up.
Well, but then the question is, if you have 95,000 left, does this not get funded at all because you did not do up
No.
to? It's a
No,
hard
it gets
number of
funded,
100,000?
it gets funded at 95.
The bucket fills as far as it goes.
Any additional discussion on this one?
It's fiscally responsible to budget if we buy it out. My concern is, are we gonna buy it out? So, I mean,
We're gonna buy it out, you saw the numbers.
yeah, but I also.
$3 million if you continue.
Compounding.
Right.
Yeah.
Sure, but what is the cost to replace the batteries, to
Probably
decommission
not
it?
$3 million.
And the
How
cost
much
to
is
take
it
them off
to
the
replace
roof,
the
gosh,
battery in a
Mr.
Tesla?
Blaze, your point's valid, but man, I hope we don't have to take them off the roof, it's a new roof.
Alright, that's good.
No. In 20 years, the roof, that's the lifespan of the roof.
I hope it's longer than that.
But it's covered by solar panels, maybe it'll last longer.
Any additional discussion on this one? We're all laboring on this one.
I'm not laboring.
Roll call vote.
Never mind.
Mr. LaPlante.
Cancel each other out again.
Mr. LaPlante. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Mr. Taylor.
No.
Mr. Barca.
Yes.
Mr. Cutter.
Yes.
Mr. Hayes.
No.
Ms. Douglas.
Yes.
Mr. Leary.
Yes.
That would surprise me twice today.
I am a yes. Motion carries 6-0.
Predictability.
Article 9 will be recommended by the Budget Committee by a vote of 6-0. That closes out our voting for this evening and leaves us with just the police station that we vote for after town deliberative. With that, any other member input, any other new business?
No.
Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion by
Second.
Mr. Leary, second by Ms. Douglas. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion carries 8-0. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.